right, and you know who's with us now? It's Kevin Hastings. Kevin Hastings is a fantasy contributor with Pitcher List. He also co-hosts 80 Grade on the On the Wire podcast on Pitcher List Pods. Is a Royals fan, but one of the coolest things about Kevin is nothing to do with his baseball, the amazing work he does around baseball, but the fact you do all of this from the sunny, beautiful beaches of Hawaii. Welcome in, and I wish you were welcoming us in to Hawaii instead. Let's turn the tables. But Kevin, make sure you're unmuted because we've had some guests make that issue. I'm sure you're good. Welcome into PHLY Phillies podcast. What is the weather like in Hawaii? What is Hawaii like right now this time of year?
Well, it's wintertime, so it's chilly. It'll only be 82 degrees today instead of 85.
Oh, man.
Wow, Kevin. Well, you know what, Kevin? It's been nice having you here on that note.
Thank you so much. It's great being here. Thank you so much.
Kev, we got this terrible whipping cold wind right now, and a nice 82-degree day sounds marvelous.
That's your winter. Okay. So interesting. Now, although we might be having different forecasts, clearly very different forecasts and experiences, we are all experiencing the chaos of the hot stove right now and all that's going on around Major League Baseball. So, as a Royals fan, but also just the person that actively covers and talks all things baseball, how are you feeling about what's been unfolding around the Yamamoto watch, Shohei Ohtani after, officially signing with the Dodgers and continuing to just break records in jersey sales and now possibly playing outfield and other names that are still on the board? What are your thoughts so far around the hot stove and how it's been going down from your perspective in Hawaii?
I think it's really been slower the past couple of days than I anticipated. I believed once Ohtani signed that would open the floodgates, and now we're still waiting on Yamamoto, and there's the news that you just talked about. It may be definitely after Christmas, maybe into the new year, so he's going to take that right up to the deadline. Imanaga, Blake Snell's still out there. I thought he would sign pretty quickly after Shohei Ohtani did, so it's really slowed down more than I thought it would.
Being a Royals fan that you are, this has to be a fairly surprising offseason for you. I want to say they were the 8th lowest payroll in baseball last year, and all of a sudden they're going out there and signing Lugo and Waka and Renfroe and spending almost as much as their team salary last year. What's going on with the Kansas City Royals? Is there a shift in ownership philosophy? Did they bring on more investors? Where's this newfound spending coming from?
I think there's a couple of things. One, there is fairly new ownership in John Sherman that came from Cleveland and purchased the Royals a couple of years back, and now they're looking to get the fan base on board with a new downtown stadium. So I think that's part of it. And then also the past couple of years with the new rules with the draft order and the MLB lottery, the Royals had the third worst record in 2022 and got the 8th pick in the draft. They had the second worst record in 2023 and they have the 6th pick in the draft. They're realizing with the new rules for the lottery, it's no longer worth having the worst record in baseball.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So as you're looking at these moves unfold, are you feeling more optimistic about the future for the Royals then?
Absolutely. These are signings that wouldn't get some fan bases really excited. However, at the same time, I have seen other fan bases upset that how did these guys end up with the Royals for that amount of money, specifically Seth Lugo. So that was a good. And as a Royals fan, this is the most exciting it's been in at least 5-6 years as far as an offseason, and the depth they've added to the bullpen with Will Smith and Nick Anderson, Chris Stratton. They had the worst bullpen in baseball last year, so fortifying that bullpen is a great move, and they don't play in a tough division, so there is some excitement.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping that the Phillies can take Will Smith off your hand at the trade deadline so they can guarantee themselves a World Series here. What is it, 3 or 4 years in a row Will Smith has won a World Series. Let's keep those communication lines open around the trade deadline. If you're looking to unload Will Smith, we'll gladly take him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a question from one of our listeners in the chat, and it actually selfishly applies to myself, being the fantasy baseball guru that you are. Wander Franco in dynasty leagues, How do you go about handling that? Because you don't want to give up on a player of that caliber, but it certainly feels like one you kind of have to consider bailing on.
Yeah. I mean, the only type of league this is a question in is a dynasty league, and that is tough. I think it would be my my last cut. You're not getting anything for him in trade. So you hold on to him as long as you can until we find out something more definite. But if I needed the spot, I would go ahead and cut bait now. But he'd be my last one. I'd try to hold on to him till we got a little more news, if possible.
Interesting. Well, I know Tyler actually has a question for you as well. Our producer, Tyler Zulli. I'll let him ask it himself, though.
Hey, Kevin. So one of the names that I think that was really interesting, but I'm not quite sure he gets moved now is former first-round pick Brady Singer. A really good year in 2022, really rough year in 2023. What's the expectation for him heading into this 2024 season?
Well, I think personally, I'm pretty optimistic on, he was the opening day starter for the Kansas City Royals last season. This year, he's probably going fourth, and that can really help alleviate a lot of pressure, and hopefully that is a part of what was ailing him in 2023, because you're exactly right. In 2022, he was showing signs of being the guy they drafted him in the first round out of Florida to be. And so hopefully the lowered expectations dropping down to fourth in the rotation can help that.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask also about Bobby Witt Jr., Kevin. What's going on there? What are you expecting? Are we going to see any sort of extension or anything? What's your expectation for Bobby?
I think his extension is now the priority. I think as far as free agents and trades go, there might be a couple of lower end deals, but for the most part, this is the team the Royals are going to run out there in 2024. So I think his extension and the talks that they have been having are their priority now, and the sky's the limit with this guy. His his baseball mind is as good as his talent and what he does, and that just helps so much. And I don't expect close to 50 stolen bases again, but he's going to just be an amazing player in all categories out there on the field.
So, Kevin, because you do so much work in the fantasy baseball world, which I'm a huge nerd of and love myself, and you can follow Kevin on Twitter at Hasting Kevin is your Twitter handle. Looking at our own Philadelphia Phillies, if you had to take one Phillies fantasy player, first, whether it be Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, a closer, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, well, who would your first overall Phillies selection be?
Oh, it would have to be Bryce Harper. That I think goes without saying. He's going to be drafted in the first round of most fantasy baseball drafts, if not very early in the second. I'm If you play in different leagues, different formats, but if you're in an on base percentage league, an OBP league, rather than a batting average league or a points league, then Kyle Schwarber skyrockets up the rankings. That low batting average or threat of the low batting average doesn't have nearly the negative impact on your teams.
Okay. I know we've talked a lot about fantasy baseball and possibly putting together a league of our own here, or putting something together. So are you actively involved in a number of leagues? And listen, I'm just going to pick your brain now.
Yeah,
what do you
leagues?
recommend? Because also a lot of people in the chat have mentioned that they have interest in wanting to be a part of a baseball fantasy league. And so has Jamie, of course, as he's alluded to many times.
I'm in a 20-plus year dynasty league, so it's very much a big part of
what
my
are
life.
What are the tips for fantasy baseball that people should know?
The tips, I think using a nice set of projections that you trust, to pick your play draft or in-season management of your teams. There's several available on Fangraphs that are free, several different sets of projections. They have an auction calculator. You just plug in the settings for your particular league, and it'll rank the players based on the settings of your league. And doing something like that with and sticking with one, so you're not cherry picking what different projection systems like about different players, and then buying into your personal biases. But finding one nice projection system that you trust and sticking with it is probably the biggest tip I would have.
Yeah, Kevin, the reason I asked you which Philly you would take first was because I was considering Trey Turner as really good value this year. He kind of had a down year for him last year, kind of got back to the back of his baseball card by the end of the year, but really had a rough, couple first months here in Philadelphia. I almost feel like he's going to be undervalued some this year around fantasy baseball because of those early struggles, or is that just us in Philadelphia looking at it through a microscope?
No, I agree. Earlier in draft season, which a lot of us have really gotten into fantasy baseball being a year-round thing. I started drafting 2024 teams in September. So early in draft season, Trey Turner was going towards the end of the first round or even early second round. And I was grabbing him in a couple of drafts when I had the 8th or 9th pick. So I agree with you 100% that last year he was the number 1 overall pick in fantasy baseball in many leagues. So, yeah, and like you said, his underlying skills were there, just didn't get the results the first couple of months. I think being able to get him later in the first round is a bargain.
Mm.
Hey, one more question for me, if you don't mind. Speaking of fantasy, one of the guys that I kind of used a little bit last year and I think could be in for like a boom 2024. I know the A's are kind of the comedy of the league the last couple of seasons, but is Zach Geloff a legit, like everyday plug and play second baseman in 2024 in your opinion?
I think so. I think if your expectations for the power aren't too high, he only played about half a season, 14 home runs, 14 stolen bases. I think the stolen bases will play. I think you can pretty much prorate them. The power, maybe not so much. I wouldn't double the 14 home runs and expect 28 or even 25 out of him, but he's probably going to hit second in that lineup. And where you hit in a lineup and play on an everyday basis, even on bad teams, you're going to accumulate the runs and RBIs that we need for our fantasy teams.
Wow. Well, Kevin, we appreciate you taking time to join us to talk about the Royals, talk about fantasy baseball, also help us live in a little bit of a fantasy world, wishing that we were in Hawaii with you for the brief moment that we had a chance. I'm looking at the sun shining, although we've got some sunshine here too. I'm looking at the sunshine. I'm looking at your Hawaiian shirt, wishing I was there.
Oh, man.
So we'll have to do this again sometime.
You're doing
Maybe.
life right, Kevin.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, actually, were you always living in Hawaii, or did you move from somewhere per se like Kansas City?
I grew up a couple hours away from Kansas City near Omaha, Nebraska. Spent a few years
Omaha.
in Texas. That's where I met my wife. And a couple of years after we got married, she was offered a job here in Hawaii. So we've been here about 9 years.
What a great excuse to move there.
Twist my arm, why don't
It was a tough decision. Yeah.
Man, such a tough decision. Okay, I love that. Oh, I do see one last great question in the chat. I think we've got a quick second to hit on it. So one of our viewers, Chris, is asking you to name the top 5 rookies of impact this year. Who your top 5 are? That's a great question for you, Kevin.
Especially in dynasty leagues by now. Yeah.
Well, put you on the hot seat there.
That is a great question. I love Wyatt Langford in Texas. Jackson Holiday, it sounds like, is going to be up with Baltimore. They're going to try to get that second AL Rookie of the Year in a row for another compensation draft pick. We got Jackson Chourio, since he signed his extension with Milwaukee. He's probably going to be up right away with the team. One guy I like that's probably not as high on a lot of people's lists that I think we might see, probably not to start the season, but maybe earlier than a lot think, is Brian Ramos for the Chicago White Sox infielder. I really liked what I saw out of him in the Arizona Fall League. And to give another one a 5th, Junior Caminero is probably going to be up early and hopefully perform well. We were spoiled last year. I think we got to be careful on our expectations of these guys in 2024.